Welcome to the Private School Leader Podcast, where private school leaders learn how to thrive and not just survive as they serve and lead their schools. I strongly believe that it is possible to have a long and happy and fulfilling career as a private school leader. And my passion is to help you figure out exactly how to do just that right here on the Private School Leader Podcast. And I'm your host, Mark Minkus. So in the fall of 1975, at a Nordstrom store in Fairbanks, Alaska, Craig Trounce showed up for work, and he's a store associate. Craig's at his cash register. He's doing some work there, and he notices a customer rolling a pair of 2 tires into the store across the floor headed towards his cash register. So Craig says, "How can I help you?" And the man says, "Well, I'm here to return these tires." He said, "I bought them at this location, and there was a guarantee that if I decided I wanted to bring them back for any reason, that the store would give me a refund." And here's the only problem is that Nordstrom store did not sell tires. But in 1975, Nordstrom purchased 3 stores from a company that did sell tires, Northern Commercial of Alaska. And so in the spring of 1975, they bought 3 locations. And these Northern Commercial Company of Alaska stores, they sold a mixture of goods and towels and linens and clothes, and they actually sold some automotive supplies, and they sold tires. So this man bought tires at a Northern Commercial of Alaska store location in the spring of 75, and now in the fall of 75, he drives 75 miles to get to this store. Alaska, everything's all spread out up there. He drives really far to get to this store, and lo and behold, he comes to find that it's not the place that he bought his tires, it's a Nordstrom. And of course, they pivoted to just selling apparel and shoes. So here's Craig standing by his cash register. Here's this gentleman with 2 tires. They don't sell tires. So if I'm Craig, I'm thinking, okay, I'm just going to say, well, and you've heard this in all of your customer service experiences over the years, things like, "I'm sorry, sir, we don't sell tires. That's not our policy. Sorry, I can't help you." Fill in the blank. But you know what? That's not what happened. Instead of turning the tires away, Craig wanted to do the right thing. He wanted to do right by the customer. He had driven those over 70 miles to return the tires. And Craig didn't know much about tires, and so he called a tire company in Fairbanks, got their thoughts on the style of tire, how much they were worth, and then he gave that customer that amount of money, took the tires, and sent him on his way. Now, you might cringe and wince and think, "Oh man, where's Mark going with this with regards to our private school?" But you might wince at the thought of a refund of an expensive purchase, especially for an item like a set of tires that Nordstrom can't resell because they don't sell tires. But let's take that small financial hit out of the equation for a minute, because that was almost 50 years ago, and Nordstrom has been getting free publicity about their customer service model because that story has been retold for almost 50 years. If you Google Nordstrom tires story, you're going to get almost 4 million results. Blog posts, forum threads, news articles. That single decision by Craig that day in 1975 has given Nordstrom almost 50 years of free publicity and word of mouth advertising because of their legendary customer service. And it's Nordstrom's story to tell. And so we want our parents to be raving fans. We want them to have that kind of experience. We want them to have, we want our school to have that kind of reputation as far as client service. We want our retention rates to be high. We want our parent satisfaction scores to be through the roof. Well, on today's episode of the Private School Leader Podcast, we are going to talk about how to make parent satisfaction skyrocket by using the Nordstrom Way. And just for a moment before we get into that, I just want to ask you, what problem can I help you solve? Are you feeling guilty that your family gets what's left of you at the end of the day? Is that your problem? Is your problem imposter syndrome? Is your problem that your day is just ruled by the tyranny of the urgent and you can't get anything done? Is your problem that you've got relentless parents? And I chose that word relentless very intentionally. Is your problem that you're just not sure how to take your leadership or your career to the next level? You've been thinking about the future. Maybe your problem is that you're just overwhelmed and feeling burnout. Well, I can help you solve your problem. And I wanted to let you know that I have 2 coaching spots open right now, and I'd love to work with you. And you can learn more at theprivateschoolleader.com/coaching. And coaching is all about transformation and helping you solve your big problem. So check it out at theprivateschoolleader.com/coaching. I've got 2 spots. I'd love to work with you. And then I'd love to give you a free gift as well, just for listening today. And this one is a 10-page PDF that's called The Top 6 Ways to Protect Your School from a Lawsuit. And we know that litigation is expensive. We know that it's time-consuming and very stressful. And this guide will help you keep your staff and students safe and help keep your school out of court. And this is a common sense guide, and it'll help you be more intentional and more proactive when it comes to protecting your school from litigation. And so you can grab this at theprivateschoolleader.com/lawsuit. Again, that's the top 6 ways to protect your school from a lawsuit. It's a free 10-page PDF, and you can grab that at theprivateschoolleader.com/lawsuit, just as a little way for me to say thank you for listening to the podcast today. All right. I told you we're going to talk about the Nordstrom Way, and we're going to talk about ways to increase parent satisfaction by using the Nordstrom Way. So first of all, let me just tell you, what is the Nordstrom Way, quote unquote? Well, first of all, it's the title of a book. And I'll link the book in the show notes. And it talks about the customer service philosophy at Nordstrom. And that centers around empowering employees to use their own judgment, just like Craig did in that pivotal moment back in 1975 in Fairbanks, Alaska. The Nordstrom Way is about going above and beyond for customers, and they have all of these legendary customer service stories. And it's also about just basically prioritizing that customer satisfaction by empowering the employee to make decisions, and with their core principle of using good judgment in all situations. We're going to unpack that a little bit more in a minute. And then what that leads to is just consistently high customer satisfaction ratings and legendary stories of exceptional service at their stores. And just a leader in the industry for almost 50 years with regards to modeling outstanding customer service, outstanding customer satisfaction ratings. Okay. And so before I get into the 6 ways that we're going to apply the Nordstrom Way to your school, I want to give you a little disclaimer. Okay. I can hear what some of you are thinking. You're like, Mark, the problem with customer service is that the customer is always right. All right. I get that. So here's the thing. When I'm talking about providing excellent client service, I've talked about this before on the podcast, that our parents are clients. Our teachers are professional. You are professional. Professionals have clients, not customers. We're going to treat them like clients. But when it comes to our client service, I'm not talking about changing a grade. I'm not talking about taking away a detention. I'm not talking about firing the soccer coach because the kid didn't get enough playing time. I'm not talking about ignoring policies in the handbook to make a parent happy. No, I'm not talking about any of that. What I'm talking about are 6 ways to apply the Nordstrom Way that are proactive things that you can do at your school to cause the parent satisfaction questions on your annual survey to skyrocket. Sound good? Okay. Here they are, the 6 ways to use the Nordstrom Way to increase parent satisfaction. Number 1, empower employees to make decisions. Number 2, use good judgment. Number 3, surprise and delight. Number 4, listen and adapt. Number 5, personalize interactions. And number 6 is create a culture of accountability. And what I'm going to do is we're going to go through each one of these, take them one at a time. I'll just explain it briefly and then just give a quick example from Nordstrom, how they do it, and then give you a couple of very specific examples of how to apply it to your school. All right. So number one is empower employees to make decisions. So first, the Nordstrom example. At Nordstrom, their employees are encouraged to make decisions on the spot to resolve a customer's issue, and they don't need to get a manager's approval. And that's kind of an outlier, because how many times have you been in a situation where you're asking for something and it's a customer service situation and the employee says, well, I need to check with my manager, or I can't do that because that's not our policy, or I would get in trouble, or I'm worried that I would get fired. I'm sorry. Nordstrom employees, they don't worry about getting in trouble. They've been empowered to make the decisions and to resolve that issue, and then the manager has their back. All right? So now let's apply that to our teachers. Here's a couple of things I want you to think about. If we empower our teachers to address parent concerns directly, then we are going to be involved later in the process when the situation escalates, instead of being involved in every situation that involves a teacher and a parent. And some of this is us as the school leaders, and some of this is our teachers. Okay? And last week I was talking on the podcast about how when you walk down the hall, sometimes it feels like your teachers are all just each of them is handing you a crying baby. And I asked the question at the time, is it because they've done everything that they can to address and try to get this baby to stop crying, or do they just not want to hold a crying baby? And so they hand it to you. And I get it. Like, some parents can be bullies. Some teachers have some trauma, and it's not an overstatement to call it trauma when it comes to dealing with certain parents. But also, some teachers just really quickly want to hand off a parent issue to administration. And we know that in our schools, that if something happens in fourth grade math class, that the place the parent has to start is with the fourth grade math teacher to talk about it. And if they can resolve it at that level, great. And most things, if our teachers are good communicators and they don't get defensive and they don't interrupt, there's on my resources page on the website, theprivateschoolleader.com/resources, I have a guide there for how to have a meeting with a difficult parent. If you follow those steps when you meet with a parent, most of the concerns are going to be resolved at the teacher-parent level. But how many of those things immediately become our problem? That's one of the reasons that our capacity is so, that we're beyond capacity, is because I feel strongly that we're getting involved earlier than we need to. And so we need to empower our employees. They don't have to check with us on everything. We need to support them. We need to have their back, because here's the thing. If they decide something and it's not exactly what you would have done, and then you ding them for that and you criticize them for that, or you don't have their back, then that's going to just be the same thing as all the customer service people out there that say, well, I need to check with my manager. So I know it's like a tightrope walk. I know it's a thin line, but we can get better at this. We need to give it some intentional thought. We need to hold our teachers accountable. I'll talk about that in number 6. We need to hold our teachers accountable for what they're supposed to do when it comes to parent interaction. And unless a parent is really being abusive and being a bully, our teachers need to talk to the parents. What's happening is that the 5% of bully parents are causing our teachers to not want to deal with the 95% of decent parents. And then that's building your workload to the degree that you can't get anything done except deal with parents. And so I know that it's hard to push back on that, but I feel like the pendulum needs to swing back in the other direction. If that parent is expressing frustration about a classroom issue, and that teacher can offer the immediate solution or the adjustment rather than needing to escalate the matter to a senior level leader, wonderful. That's what we want, but they need to be empowered and feel supported to do that, just like the Nordstrom Way. All right. So again, there's no perfect outcome in that scenario. Every school is different, but I want you to take the general concept of empowering your teachers to make decisions and then having their back to see how, and holding them accountable for what they need to do when it comes to parent concerns, that doing those things consistently will reduce your number of parent interactions. Okay. Number 2 on our list of how we're going to use the Nordstrom Way to increase parent satisfaction. Number 2 is use good judgment. All right. If you know anything about Nordstrom, you may have heard this story. Their employee handbook is a 5x7 piece of cardstock. That's their employee handbook. And on one side, it welcomes the new employee to be working at Nordstrom. And on the other side, it says, we have one rule: use good judgment in all situations. That's their employee handbook. Okay? Use good judgment in all situations. So the principle of using good judgment at Nordstrom kind of dovetails with number 1, which is empowering the employees. And so if they use good judgment about their, the way that they're interacting, about the decisions that they're making, if they're doing something that's prioritizing the customer, or in our case, the client, at Nordstrom, employees are trusted to act in the best interest of that customer. And so when they do the thing that I mentioned in number 1, which is empowered to make decisions, the expectation, which is made clear, is to use good judgment. So, the classic example, of course, is about returning the set of tires, and they don't even sell tires. That employee, that story, Craig, in Fairbanks, Alaska, he recognized that this customer had a legitimate concern, and he used his best judgment to not strictly adhere to that return policy. And then that kind of decision really just shows his good judgment in that moment to prioritize customer satisfaction over what might be, there's a lot of rigidity to rules out there in the customer service world. And again, I said in my disclaimer, I'm not talking about changing rules, changing grades, taking away detentions. I'm not talking about that, but I'm talking about you and your teachers just really trying to use good judgment in all situations. So what's an example of that we can apply to the school? All right. So let's say that a parent reaches out about their kids, the way that they're interacting with kids on the playground, and that those social interactions aren't going all that well. Okay. This kind of, again, goes along with number 1. We want that teacher to use good judgment, and then we want to support them. And if we do that, then they're going to increase their capacity. They're going to increase their confidence, and then they're going to increase the regularity how regularly they will handle these problems at the teacher level, the teacher parent level. And so again, we've got to build them up by reminding them that we have confidence in their judgment. And you're thinking, well, yeah, but I don't have confidence in the judgment of these 2 teachers over here. I get that. But, and so just like we differentiate for our students, we're going to differentiate for our teachers. And those need a little more supervision. Those need a little more accountability. Those need the check with me first kind of a conversation. But there are a lot of our teachers that can do better with this if we will encourage them. Again, number 1 and number 2 go together. Empower the teacher, encourage them to use good judgment, and then have their back. Okay, let's move on to number 3. And number 3 is surprise and delight. And you've heard me talk about surprise and delight on the podcast before. And let me give you a quick Nordstrom example. There's a Nordstrom store in Chicago. It's not that close to the airport. And there was a gentleman who had a business trip and he had a connecting flight at O'Hare. And he realized when he was going through TSA, he's wearing his sneakers, he's wearing his casual clothes, but he's got his suit and his business attire in his luggage. He realizes that he forgot his dress shoes at home. And so he calls the Nordstrom in Chicago and tells him about the problem. The person who answered the phone said, "No problem. I got this. When's your flight? What gate?" So on and so forth. And the employee got shoes in that gentleman's size, asked about the color, took them, drove out to O'Hare, met the guy at the airport, and said, "Well, we'll send you a bill, or we'll put it on your credit card or whatever." And so it's like the surprise and delight, going the extra mile, free alterations when someone buys a suit or a dress, gift wrapping, like those little things that you're not expecting. That's what surprise and delight is all about. It's in the name. It's a pleasant surprise and it's delightful. And so I want to give you a quick aside here before I tell you how to apply this to your school, because I want to really bring this home as to how powerful surprise and delight can be. And it's about my school, and in the summer of 2014, we had a retention crisis on our hands. We had so many families that left during the summer of 2014. And we did some things. We did a lot of things, and we worked really hard. And 2 years later, our retention rates were so high, they were higher than the national average for private schools, that we, myself and a couple of my colleagues, were invited to speak at a national convention to talk about how we solved our retention crisis. Now, I've taken those strategies and I put them into a podcast episode 9, called 8 Strategies to Increase Student Retention That Actually Work. I will link that in the show notes at theprivateschoolleader.com/episode 103 so that you can listen to episode 9 and get the goods on what we talked about at that convention. But I'm telling you, a big, big, big part of it was surprise and delight, and being very intentional about just making sure that these parents felt seen from a client standpoint, but also, surprising them with delightful things. So I'll let that episode speak for itself. You can get that in the show notes, but let's specifically apply it to the school before we go on to our fourth point. Teachers can go above and beyond by sending personalized notes to parents after a school event. The handwritten note that goes home in the book bag or in the assignment pad, the handwritten note is something that's very rare. And so then it's a surprise and it's delightful and it took time to do. Do our teachers have time to write handwritten notes? Of course they don't. That's why it's a surprise. Okay. But for you, let's apply this to you for a minute. I'm telling you, as a person who for the last over 20 years, I've handwritten thank you cards for everyone in my department or my school when I was head of school, and gave them to them the school day before Thanksgiving break. Okay, so did I have time over the last 20 years to write, over 50 thank you cards every year? No. That's why I start a month early and write 3 or 4 a day and schedule it. And, so I'm just saying that everything we can make an excuse for that we don't have time to do the thing. It just matters how important the thing is. I think that something that's really, really important is, when it comes to surprise and delight, is to just noticing things and then acknowledging them. So like a little follow-up email thanking the parent for, showing up to a meeting or a parent-teacher conference, summarizing the key points that were discussed. But, one of the examples that I'll give for surprise and delight, I've talked about this before, where when I warm up my microwave lunch every day, I have a practice where I pull out my phone, I look at my gallery from the previous 24 hours, because when I'm walking around campus, recess, lunch, hallways, in and out of classrooms, I'm taking pictures on my phone. And then I'm sending those off. I'm posting a few on Instagram, but I'm sending those off to the parent, and it's saying on the subject line, Nava at recess, or it's just saying recess, or it's saying, Jimmy, or, it's saying science class, exclamation point. And it's just that, the parent, boom, in the to line, it's parent name, and then attach the photo, send. Okay. It takes 10, 20 seconds to do it. And I'm telling you, the surprise and delight aspect of a parent getting a picture of a smiling kid, or a kid doing something interesting, or the kid that is reporting that he's struggling at recess, a picture of that kid having a good time at recess. It's surprise and delight, but it also makes an emotional connection. And I'm telling you, it increases parent satisfaction, and it increases retention. Okay. We are talking about the 6 ways to use the Nordstrom Way to increase parent satisfaction at your school. Number 1, empower employees to make decisions. Number 2, use good judgment. Number 3, surprise and delight. And number 4 is listen and adapt. So this one's pretty straightforward, listen and adapt. The Nordstrom example is they actively solicit customer feedback. They make that a huge priority, and they then make changes based on that input. And then that's often seen in the product offerings and the way that they provide services. And so that's the real key when it comes to applying this to school is that your school probably already does something where you're getting feedback. If you don't have an annual parent survey, that is a priority. If you don't ask, how are you going to know? And I know sometimes smaller schools, when you're a one-man or a one-woman show as the principal, as the administrator, that's really hard to do. But it's so important to figure out a way to get that parent survey. And if you have a little bit bigger team, then that feedback can be more regular. Maybe it's if you're a semester school or a trimester school, to get that feedback. And sometimes that feedback is hard. I know that, you work really hard, and then, we do the annual survey in the spring and then get those results back in the early summer. And sometimes it's hard. You work really hard, and then you're expecting it to be really good, and then you get other feedback. But here's the other thing I want you to know is that you can go through all of the effort of creating the survey, giving the survey, getting it back, doing some things with the data, and so on and so forth. But if you don't do something with that feedback and then communicate to the parents what you did, then it's almost a complete waste of time. Okay? There's 2 things going on here. Number 1 is that if you don't communicate to the parents what them taking the time to do the survey, what that led to, then next year you're going to reinforce that the parent input is not valued. But I'm telling you, if you address the concerns and you do some things and communicate them to the parents, your participation rate in that parent survey will maintain or increase because they'll see that their input is valued. So it's not just the survey part. It's the what are we going to do about it, and then also communicating that to your families. Okay. Number 5, personalized interactions. So the employees at Nordstrom are trained to remember customers. They're trained in how to remember names, remember that customer's preferences, and even create a personalized kind of like shopping list, but certainly a personalized shopping experience. Kind of think of that bartender that, sees the regulars come in and they know already what the person's go-to, drink of choice is, and they start making it as soon as the person starts walking towards the bar. That's the goal there for the employees at Nordstrom when it comes to that familiarity with their customers and that personal touch. And then that's what keeps them coming back. So how can we personalize interactions in our school? Well, first of all, for you and for your teachers, we need to learn the names. Learn the names of the parents, especially the newer parents. They already feel awkward being newer. You see someone at a conference and you haven't seen them in 2 years, and they come up to you and they say hi and they use your first name. How does that make you feel? It makes you feel great. They remembered you, they know your name. you made an impression, whatever it is, people like to hear their own name. And so when it comes to our parents, let's learn their names. Let's use their names. For teachers, when it comes to kids, when a kid's out sick for a couple of days, I feel strongly that if a kid is out sick for more than one day, there should be some sort of communication from that homeroom teacher to the parent and just say, we've missed Amanda and just wanted to check and see if she's okay. I'm not saying they have to do that every single time a kid is out for one day, but if a kid's out that second day, that should trigger something as far as a communication. Personalized attention. We don't ever want our parents to think I can get that for free in the public school, because usually with private schools, there's a lot of things that we offer, but one of the things that we offer, almost without exception, is a smaller teacher to student ratio than the nearby public school. And so if they're expecting a certain level of personal care and attention, and we're not even coming close to that, then that's when they start to get the wandering eye and they're looking around at either other schools that are private that they think do a better job at this, or they're looking at the public school or some other option, maybe even cyber school. So we have these opportunities. Important milestones and preferences for each student. Making a big deal when they lose a tooth, or making a big deal about birthdays, making a big deal when the mom has a baby, and the second grader is now the big brother. These things, making a big deal and celebrating, and just a quick note to the family as far as like an email. Just congratulations, and then just, I've mentioned birthdays, just something that's personalized, that notices that what they want us to know that their child is seen, right? They want to know that their child is seen at school. And when we see their child at school, and our teachers work so hard and they do such a good job of making sure that child is seen, but if all that stays at school and there's never that level of communication so that the parent feels like their child is seen, then they're not going to know. And that narrative void will exist. There are ways to fill that narrative void. So we want to give them that personalized attention, those personalized interactions. And then that brings us to our final way that we're going to apply the Nordstrom Way to our schools, and that's create a culture of accountability. So at Nordstrom, they hold their employees pretty accountable for their service, and they have high expectations. They have clear expectations. There's regular feedback from the managers about how it's going. There's conversations. They're holding them accountable. And at our school, I know that sometimes that's hard because we're so busy that it's hard to hold our teachers accountable, and we're just happy that they're doing a good job and that they're doing what they're supposed to do. But we need to establish clear expectations for how our staff interact with the parents, and then make sure that they're doing it, hold them accountable. And so, for example, following up with teachers to make sure that they are doing the things that you agreed to do when you were in that meeting. So, second grade teacher and you and the parents of this child, there was a meeting, and then there was an action plan that was decided upon. It's your responsibility to follow up and make sure that the teacher is actually following through, because there's nothing worse than going through the discomfort of that meeting, getting it done, getting people on the same page, shaking hands at the end, and it seems like we're moving forward. And then maybe with good intentions, but a busy schedule, the teacher doesn't follow through, and now things are 5 times worse. And so that's one way, is to make sure that we keep our promises. But another way is to just hold your teachers accountable for the stuff that they're supposed to do with regards to parent communication. So a quick example is that at our school, the expectations are homework has to be posted by 4 p.m. every day. The gradebook has to be updated a minimum every 2 weeks. When you start a unit, there's a parent email that's real quick, just a paragraph. Hey, we're starting this unit. We just finished up, blah, blah, blah. Maybe a photo or two. Really excited about this next thing. That fills that narrative void about what'd you learn at school today? Nothing. What'd you do at school today? Nothing. Did you have fun? I don't know. So that start of unit email has filled that narrative void for us. And then 3 times a year, because we have trimesters, it's the homeroom teacher / advisor sends an email once a year, 3 times a year. Once a trimester, so that's 3 times a year. The I get your kid, the kid rockstar email is what we call it. So now those are the expectations, but it's my job to hold them accountable to make sure that they're doing those things. Because let me tell you, if they're not posting homework, that's going to cause stress at home and arguments. Well, no, I don't have homework, and well, get your homework. You know what I'm saying? So it's like whatever the expectations are for communication, we need to hold them accountable and make sure that they're doing a good job. Okay, so the big takeaways from today's episode, we're talking about the 6 ways to use the Nordstrom Way to increase parent satisfaction. Number 1, empower employees to make decisions. Number 2, use good judgment. Number 3, surprise and delight. Number 4, listen and adapt. Number 5, personalize the interactions. And number 6, create a culture of accountability. And I like to end every episode with a call to action. And so I would like for you to think which one of these 6 strategies needs the most work at my school, and then take action on one thing to make it better. So I just want to remind you that I can help you solve your biggest problem, and I'd love to work with you one-on-one, and a reminder that I have 2 coaching spots open right now. And I just would encourage you to go to theprivateschoolleader.com/coaching, find out more about how that works. Would love to work with you. I want to give you another free gift. This one, we've been talking about meetings. This one's called the 7 Steps to Having Successful Meetings with Upset Parents. I actually think I mentioned this one earlier in the episode. This is an 11-page PDF, and it gives you a step-by-step plan to have better meetings with the parents at your school. You know, every good teacher has a lesson plan. Every good coach has a game plan. But I think that too many private school leaders don't have a plan when you sit down with an upset parent. Well, you have a plan now, and it's at theprivateschoolleader.com/meeting. 7 steps to having successful meetings with upset parents. That's a free guide for you over at theprivateschoolleader.com/meeting. Today's show notes are at theprivateschoolleader.com/episode 103. And I'd love to hear from you. Shoot me an email at mark.o.minkus@gmail.com. If you could review and rate the podcast wherever you listen to it, that helps the algorithm push it out to private school leaders all over the world. We are now in 61 countries. We just added Ireland. We just added Kenya and Ethiopia. It's amazing that this podcast is getting out, and the way that it does is with the algorithm. So if you write a review, that helps. And listen, I just want to say how much I appreciate you, and thank you so much for taking time out of your busy week. You're doing so much for these lucky kids at your school, and I just appreciate the fact that you took some of your precious time to join me here today. And I'll see you next time right here on the Private School Leader Podcast. And until then, always remember to serve first, lead second, and make a difference.